It's Jay Stongo, Gary 5, Jahu Jifkidas, Mvskoke Radio Mar Hedgewedskis. Welcome to our program here on a very chilly Mvskoke, Okmulgee morning here. We're going to brave the cold and thank you all for tuning in and checking us out today. We'll be sharing a couple of segments on some subjects that are pretty interesting, kind of science-oriented, if you will. In the first section, we'll be talking about an event that our Department of Health has got coming up dealing with opioid abuse. We'll find out how it affects our own people, what it's all about, and why all the attention being paid to the subject, not only here but across the nation. In our second segment, we'll be talking to a woman who's involved with the STEM program. That's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And believe it or not, there are a whole lot of Native kids involved in that kind of thing. So we're going to find out some possibilities. And I do believe they've got a seminar, something like that, coming up where students can participate. But first, let me welcome to our studios the couple of gentlemen who are dealing with the opioid addiction project. Mr. Tyler Stone is the project director, and Kyle Sprang is the director of the behavioral, what would you call it, behavioral sciences?
Behavioral services.
Okay. Let me get your microphones up here. We want to we appreciate you guys coming in and talking about this subject. Now, it affects our whole nation, but even our particular Mvskoke Creek Nation to a degree that's just got some people worried. So welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, now, Kyle, since you're the director here of the Behavioral Services Program, let's kind of start there and get a kind of a capsule idea of what your division's all about.
Behavioral services, do you hear me pretty well? Behavioral services covers a lot of different. We're going to do outpatient. We also have numerous grants within our program where we take care of, and Tyler can talk more about his specific grant, where we work with Native Americans who are dealing with substance abuse. Dealing with parenting issues, dealing with children who are developmentally delayed or behind in hitting developmental milestones. So we cover a lot of different areas, and we're definitely wanting to open up more to deal with Native Americans who are dealing with substance abuse, not just alcohol, but definitely opioid and other issues.
Right. Now, we've heard for years that Native American people have had to deal with the alcohol problem, and what is one of our biggest enemies, let's call it. But is the opioid problem replacing that now, or is it on a par with it as far as the way it impacts our people?
The opioid problem is, they're kind of, how do I kind of say it? The alcohol problem has been there. The opioid problem is gaining speed, unfortunately, because one of the issues is over the years, when we go to the doctor, we're always expecting to get a script. Often we get a script regarding antibiotic, or we get something if I'm in pain or I injure myself, or I'm having, or I just had minor surgery or major surgery. What we do is we get a script for something to do with my pain, so I can get through this and move on. The issue has happened is this has been going on for so many years, and tolerance builds up so quickly that it's turned into abuse, and people don't realize it.
Right. You go to the doctor, they give you something for pain, script for pills, and you're off and running. And you don't really think about it. I guess you sort of expect it, and don't think of it in terms of perhaps the problems that it could be causing later on. It's just sort of a natural thing. Now, Tyler, tell me about your project, what you've got particularly set up and looking to.
Sure. So I work for the Meth and Suicide Prevention Initiative. It's actually split up into two different grants, and one of those grants we focus on substance abuse. So what my team and I do is we focus primarily on, we work with a lot of youth, and we do a lot of life skills groups. A lot of the kiddos that we see may experience or may try certain substances, and it could be a result of anxiety, depression, stress. So the goal in these life skills groups is to teach them the issues or the harmful effects of these substances, and also trying to replace some of those coping skills with more healthy coping skills, such as deep breathing, such as having a conversation with a trusted adult, being active, exercise, physical activity, reading, writing down some of their feelings. So really just trying to replace some of those more harmful coping skills with more healthy coping skills.
Yeah, and of course you have a conference coming up on the 27th to deal with these specific problems here.
We
now,
do.
When we often hear the word opioid tossed out there, and without too much of an explanation what all is involved here.
Mm-hmm.
Now I hear the word opioid, and I think of opium, the poppies
Sure.
and the whole thing, and then
Sure.
conversion of that in through the processes into heroin, and
Mm-hmm.
we've all kind of heard of junkies and
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But when we say opioid in today's context, what all's involved? What drugs are there?
So you have your, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You have your hydrocodones, your oxycodones, morphines, codeines. You're also going to hear about, heroin is an illegal version of opioid. You have your synthetic opioids such as fentanyl, like the patches, and your morphines. So a lot of the latter ones are prescribed legally through a prescription.
Hmm.
Aside from heroin, of course, but
Yeah, I would assume that most of them could be obtained through a physician.
Right.
Prescription. Come on,
Sure.
Gary, wake up. And then, of course, you have the heroin problem, and I would presume that all of these things would be available on the streets through some illegal means.
a lot of them can be.
Okay.
A lot of them can be. They sell pretty. They're pretty expensive on the streets.
Mhm.
So you can have doctor shopping, which Kyle, if you have more information about that, we could talk about that. But essentially, individuals could go to different primary care doctors, get a script for pain,
Mhm.
even if they're not in pain, and turn around and sell those drugs on the streets,
Sure.
and sell them for a pretty penny.
Yeah, I would assume that would be a pretty dangerous process too, because you don't know who you're dealing with and whether or not they've got a little piece in their pocket and
Right.
and keeping the drugs and your money. So.
Right.
Now, you mentioned there that the kinds of things that are available. Do we have any feel for how it affects a Native American community? Do you guys have numbers either nationally or perhaps even locally? Are those available?
Yes, so these numbers come from the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, and what they've reported is that the current opioid-related overdose death rate is 13.7 individuals per 100,000 for Native Americans. And the national rate, so the national average in the U.S. is 13.1 per 100,000 people. So the overdose for opioid-related drugs is actually slightly above the national rate for Native Americans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the part I'm now interested in is the way that our own Department of Health handles it. Now, Kyle, do you have perhaps can share with us the policy as far as our staff people prescribing these things?
In October, the federal government came down pretty hard on all physicians to cut down on the amount of opioid-related scripts they were writing. And it significantly decreased nationwide. It also decreased significantly here within our nation and the other nations, not only here in Oklahoma, but in the United States. That being said, they've also seen a higher increase of individuals who are not able to get their substance, and they're going through detox and having a lot more difficulty because detox from opioid use, especially been using fairly heavily, is not a comfortable thing. It's going to take several days for you to detox, and it's fairly high up there as far as you have to have a medical detox.
So we're talking withdrawal symptoms.
Oh yeah, the withdrawals will not be fun whatsoever.
Okay. Now I guess I'm interested in what are the thresholds, perhaps, or the benchmarks that your department observes when a staff member prescribes these things? Are there certain levels of pain, perhaps, or other symptoms that...
That is something I don't know, because that's something that one of our physicians could probably answer that question. But that's something I know when we're having a conference coming up, which I think we're going to mention here shortly.
Yes.
Because we're having a pain management opioid abuse conference. In that conference, we're going to have several physicians and the medical directors, not including ours, but also medical directors from the other nations will all be there, and they'll all discuss what they run into regarding the number of scripts, the decrease, people shopping, like Tyler had mentioned earlier, to trying to gather pain medication, and what they've seen as physicians. And that's one of those open discussions we'll have for any member who wants to attend this conference coming up on the 27th.
Well, you mentioned fatalities and the numbers, I guess, which are pretty alarming. Now, some feel for how this affects the Mvskoke Creek Nation. I mean, if you don't have any specifics, but that's okay, but some kind of an idea, perhaps, either one of you.
So like you said, we don't we don't have any specific numbers, but anytime there's been a death in the community, it's affected a lot of us, and we know that these deaths can be really tough to handle as a community. When someone dies in our community, which is very close knit, it affects us all, whether we know it or not. Sure. I think everyone would be on board with decreasing any kind of preventable death that we can. I haven't seen anyone argue that. I think a lot of people who are struggling with opioid addiction, it's at no fault of their own. It affects everyone. You use the term junkie, and a lot of time that kind of has a negative connotation to it, because a lot of times people think, well, they chose to kind of go down that path. But unfortunately, and in my own personal life, I've seen people who were prescribed these medications and unfortunately mixed it with alcohol and got severely addicted and got the help they need, and maybe even relapsed because those pain symptoms came back. And it affects, this epidemic, can really affect anyone. Right.
And being a tribal society, we're, as you say, very close knit. Somebody gets hurt in this position, and that's my cousin, that's my uncle, my grandpa, my father, my brother, this kind of thing. And so it's not just a single individual here that are going to be dealing with it. Now, the feel for the intensity of the problem. Maybe is there any way we can kind of point at it? Are there any anecdotal remembrances you guys have, or something that perhaps one of your staff members has passed on? Like, give me an idea, perhaps. Now, this may not exactly be your part of the story here, but you've got to have heard this kind of thing as your staff talk and share, and I presume some consultations. But I guess how bad is it, so to speak, maybe might be an easier way to approach that.
It's hard to put your number on the exact, your thumb on the exact number. The reason why is, like Tyler kind of also mentioned earlier, is that we go to the doctor, we get prescribed this medication, we're taking it like we're prescribed, not realizing that tolerance builds up so quickly, and it's a highly addictive medication. And so you take it, and then all of a sudden you start craving it very, very quickly. And so when you start to taper off or go down, all of a sudden you have this craving, and then sometimes you associate the pain, and if you haven't worked through some of the pain or even done some of the physical therapy that often is associated when there is an injury, then you feel that pain, then you go back to the doctor, say, doctor, I'm still feeling pain, and then thus what happens is they continue prescription. And sometimes you say, I'm still feeling pain, because tolerance builds up. Tolerance means you have to have more and more and more in order to get the same effect. So as your body builds up tolerance, then you're needing a little bit more, and the doctor, when you be a good doc and not when you're in pain, and so you work through your physical therapy, they add a little bit more and a little bit more, and this is kind of slowly, how it's become a problem within family members, because all of us have family members who had injuries or whatever else, and like we listed off earlier, some of those medications are things that any one of us have taken, whether you went through injury of broken foot or a rotator cuff sore, or if you went to the dentist and had a tooth pulled, they might prescribe you Tylenol 3, which has codeine in it, and that's a synthetic opioid. So it's out there in a lot of different things. It's not always just the one avenue you might think of, or the other avenue, which we mentioned is that heroin junkie that's shooting up, or things on that line.
Let me share an experience, and perhaps you can tell me where that might fit.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I had a horrible case of pneumonia to the point where a lung was collapsing. Spent some time in the hospital, had surgery, and as a kid, I don't remember what was going on or what they were talking about. But afterwards, you could feel the hurt. I mean, it was and major stitches and things. I've got this huge scar that I'm going to have to deal with. But I remember them coming in and giving me some shots and saying, well, this will help you feel better and make you go to sleep. And sure enough, you kind of smile and doze off. And then later on, you might interpret any little twitch, any little pain as a doctor, nurse, I need some more medicine. So is this kind of what we're talking about as far as somebody experiencing a growing need, perhaps, or the addiction to a painkiller?
Yes, it's very similar to that. I mean, but that's in that situation, you had surgery and you needed that. A friend of mine just had 17 vertebrae fused in his back, so he's taking some of this medication right now, which is understandable. But he's also a clinician, and he realizes the high likelihood or the propensity for abuse. So he's very mindful as he has kind of set for himself, how bad does the pain get? Because when you mention and that's what happens, we get that twitch of pain, so I want to have something to make it go away. He understands he's going to have some discomfort and some pain, but part of that is also the healing of the nerve endings, the muscles getting reused to moving again, things along that line. Like I'm sure in your own situation, there was some pain and discomfort as that healing process happened. And if you tried to go for the pain medication every single time, then it would have lessened or slowed down the effects of that healing process. And then if it was allowed to go on for a long period of time and wasn't really watched very closely, it could have turned into addiction.
Okay, well, I felt I was close enough. And some of the pain, as I remember now, wasn't quite as intense as I was putting on, because you learn to enjoy that little buzz, and then you drift off and that kind of thing. And it wasn't until years later I looked at it again and thought, my God, man, you were this close to being addicted to this thing. And I can see how easy it would be. Now, let's look at the conference for a few minutes here now.
Sure.
You've got a lineup of speakers and presentations that are going to be explaining some of these items we've discussed and further.
Right. So we have some speakers who are going to come in and talk about what their organization is doing to combat the opioid epidemic. The idea of this conference is it's not a big medical conference. So we do have a lot of people who work in the medical field who are being here, but that's because they're the experts on this. But the narrative of the conference is, and our target audience is everyday people like you and me, right? People in the community who want to know, what can we do to help? What are opioids? how is this affecting our communities, and answers like that. So the goal is to have community members. So what we've been doing is reaching out to community members with our flyer and visiting community centers and telling them about this conference and offering transportation for those who can't make it. And the idea is we would like for community members to join us for this conference and learn more about the issue. And they may be able to relate to this. They may have a family member or a friend who's suffering from addiction. And hopefully from this conference they can learn, okay, what are my action steps? What can I do to help my friend or my family member who is unfortunately, or possibly addicted to opioid medication?
Well, nobody goes into this kind of thing looking to become addicted. Oh boy, I hope I get to be a junkie.
Absolutely.
Now, will part of this conference look at maybe perhaps signal flags or benchmarks where you could recognize the symptoms? Will you be sharing that kind of information?
Yes, we'll mention warning signs and things like that family members can be aware of, so if they see their uncle or their aunt or their son, taking this medication. At what point does it kind of begin to cross that line where it goes from being medical use to now it's beginning to become more of an addiction? Because it happens so slowly and so easily, and you don't realize it's happening often.
And taking that a step further, would you have someone there who could address the subject of trying to deal with someone who's addicted? I mean, they're going to say, "No, I'm not. I'm just, taking medicine, this kind of thing. Leave me alone." Kind of some psychological reaction or something. Would you have someone who could
Yes.
deal with it?
Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of the history of the problem, how it's become a problem. We'll discuss even the lawsuit, and I believe one of the attorneys that's in part of the lawsuit will be there to discuss, so if people have questions, they can ask that. Then we'll have the medical effects of what's going on, and then we'll also talk about the psychological things, what family members can do when they do start noticing these things, and how they can help, and if they can't get help, how they can refer to or who they can call to get help.
Now, the tribe has filed a lawsuit. A number of tribes in other states and cities have also become parts of these actions. Now, that's not specifically the kind of thing you guys deal with. It's another part of the question. But you mentioned there will be someone there who could address
Yes,
this
and
thing.
if people have questions, they will be able to ask him.
Okay, because we're kind of wondering, we're hearing from national and federal sources and Congress and all the way down through city and state governments. They're all joining the suits against big pharma, as we have come to know it, and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you guys didn't have to do this." Anyway, that's another question. And so you'll be able to answer those kinds of questions.
Yes.
Now, why don't you share a little bit more about your agenda there? What are you going to be looking at besides those kind of questions?
As far as the conference,
Right.
we're going to have a panel of different doctors in the field, and it's going to be a Q&A. So this is a great time for our audience members to open up with any kind of questions they may have. We'll have some questions by our moderator as well, who can ask some of these questions. And these are kind of everyday questions that community members may have about opioid addiction. What are opioids? How are we combating this problem? Where can somebody go for help? Things like that. So we'll have a panel. We also have a pain management clinic that is in the making right now. So we'll have our Secretary of Health talking more about that. We will also have Light Horse will be there as well. So we're going to have somebody from Light Horse just kind of talking about what they've done as a tribal police department, and what are some of the issues that they see surrounding opioid abuse or even overdoses. How have they kind of combated that? Really, it's just a really good way to network and just learn more about what we can do, what are next steps for us as community members.
I'm glad you mentioned Light Horse. I hadn't thought about that. The law and order angle there is quite important. Have you had any communication with those folks about the problems that they have to deal with? I mean, there are a lot of drug busts. We see stories from time to time of some fairly large ones, but nothing of huge proportions around here, but what kind of stuff have they shared with you?
The only thing that I've really talked to Light Horse about was more of their mental health calls.
Okay.
So we work to, I know that Kyle's spoken with them too, I think about a different matter, but I've actually spoken to them about how to respond to like crisis calls and doing more mental health training specifically about suicide. So we're looking more into that, and we're also planning another event with Light Horse called the Drug Take Back event, which kind of ties into what we're talking about here, which is we encourage people in the communities that have leftover medication that they're not using, or maybe they were prescribed to but they didn't use all of the medication they were prescribed, to safely dispose of that medication and get it out of the house. And that's another strategy that family members can take to protect their family as well.
And to keep the kids from sneaking a pill or two out of
Sure.
your medicine cabinet. Now, in the last few minutes we have here, let's kind of run over the conference again. It's coming up towards the end of the month, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you want to share specifics?
Yeah, it's going to be March 27th. It's going to be from 9 to 5. It's going to be at the River Spirit Casino Resort. That's 8330 Riverside, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So when you go to the main casino resort there, it's going to be, there's some escalators. As soon as you walk into those main doors, there's some escalators that go up. We're going to be on the second floor. We'll have a registration table there. You can register on site, or you can register at our link we have here. It's mcnopioid.eventbrite.com. Or if you want to call us and register that way, you can give us a call. Our number is 918-758-1930. Talk to one of our staff members. We'll just get some basic info from you guys, and we can get you registered through that Eventbrite as well.
Is there a cost?
It is free.
Free?
Yep.
That's a pretty good job.
It's free.
Now, I guess the last question maybe I want to ask is, if you had to give your own perspective or opinion on the size of the problem our tribe is facing, how would you characterize it? I mean, what would you call it, or how would you, describe it, I guess?
Tough question you ask.
That's what I'm supposed to do.
Well, you told me you were going to do that. It's hard to describe because you don't know at what point does it become addiction. You don't at what point do I start craving this medication. At what point do I start doing things to get more of a high? And you mentioned like when you had taken medication, you felt that woo-hoo and that euphoric feeling. The problem is let's say I do that and I'm taking the medication as prescribed and I start taking a drink. Well, that has what's called a synergistic effect. And synergy just means 1 + 1 = more than 2. So I'm taking my medication as prescribed. I drink something, not trying to get drunk, but I just drink something, and I get more of a wow from that medication, because the two combined can be much more than just the two by themselves. And so that wow feeling is a powerful addiction, addictive property. And all of us might have a wow feeling of something like that, and it makes us very hard to say no to it. And all of a sudden my body starts thinking about it, and I start focusing on it, and my body's craving it, saying more and more, hey, this felt really good, let's take this pill. And all of a sudden I drink something with it, and I feel really, really good. And then I can mix it with some other stuff. If I mix it, I step it up from alcohol, and I start, smoking pot along with it, then I get even more of a wow out. Or I start taking this medication, and then I do cocaine with it, which is called a speedball, when you take an upper and a downer together, and it's even more of a wow effect. So that wow effect can be, slowly become something that you chase after, and it's like that, that proverbial boiling frog. It just slowly, the temperature rises and rises and rises, and doesn't realize at what moment did it become, cooked. It's the same way with that addiction thing. It's slowly, 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 but then you start looking for ways, and you start thinking about ways, and you start coming up with ways of how can I do that. So to answer your question, it's hard to define at what moment does it become addiction within the family or within the individual, the loved one.
This kind of thing is no respecter of race or economic situation. We've heard of a lot of famous people who made these mistakes and are no longer with us.
Right.
Well, anyway, let's not get too morbid about it here. Now, gentlemen, one last word. If someone wanted to get some more information, what number would they call?
Sure. So they can call us at, again, we're at Creek Nation Behavioral Health. So if you forget the number, you can always Google it, or even call the Mvskoke Creek Nation operator, and they'll transfer you to us. But our number is 918-758-1930. They can talk to any of our staff and ask for more information regarding the conference. If they want to register over the phone, all they have to do is just give us some basic information and we can get them registered. Or if you just want to show up to the conference, that's fine as well. We'll have on-site registration. Again, it's going to be at the River Spirit Casino Resort. It's going to be on the second floor where they do the conferences. We'll have a table set up right there as you get off the escalators. So
Okay.
we'd love to have you.
Right now, once again, that's March 27th, coming up pretty soon.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, Kyle, Tyler, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing this information. It will be one we'll keep a subject we'll keep an eye on, and don't be too surprised if I call you guys to come in and chat with us again at some point.
Sure, gladly.
We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we're going to take a short pause here, and we're going to be back with Apollonia Pena to talk about the STEM projects and how Native kids can become more involved in science. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio. We'll be right back.
Who am I? Am I Native? I don't want people assuming things because I'm Indian. I just want to be me. But how do I live in two worlds? Some guys just check out by doing meth. But that ain't for me. Because I see my family, my friends, my drum making, my future. There are a lot of cool things about being who I am. And meth isn't one of them.
Learn more at ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians. Who am I? Am I Indian? Just 'cause I'm a girl from the res, don't make things up about me. What if I move away? Then who am I? Some kids try meth just to escape, but then I think about my grandma, my little brother, my beadwork, my poetry, and I think, I like who I am, and I know meth is not for me.
Check out ncai.org, a message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio. Gary Fife, Joho Jeffkinos. And joining us here in the studio is Apollonia Pena. Now, I had to work on that to get it right, but I got it right, I guess. I got a thumbs up, so welcome to our program. Ms. Pena, we appreciate you taking in a few minutes on a beautiful day here to come talk to us. Now, for folks who might have heard the phrase STEM but don't know what it is, can you, let's start there. What is STEM? Let's explain that.
So for this program that we're doing, the Native STEAM Camp is what we're calling it. It's science, technology, engineering, anthropology, and mathematics.
Okay, that's the A is not a part I had heard before.
Yeah, sometimes it's used, other times it's not. I'm doing this program in conjunction with this nonprofit called Thick Descriptions, and Suzette Chang, who is the director of that nonprofit, she is an anthropologist, and that's her background, so we wanted to include that.
In my experience as a reporter, I don't run across too many Native people who are involved in any of those four topics that you just mentioned, but you know, that's not to say they aren't there. I just never ran across them, but it's not something that readily comes to mind. Do you have some feel for any numbers or positions or anything, a person that might come to mind that is involved in one of these programs?
Can you say that again?
We got any famous STEM Indians? That way.
Well, the one that immediately comes to mind is Mary Ross. She is a Cherokee woman, and she was a mathematician, and she was an engineer, and she was from the Tahlequah area. And she helped out NASA, I believe, and I think that was in the 1960s.
Right, yes. I believe they're putting her image on a coin, too, aren't they?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good to hear.
Yeah, the new dollar coin, Sagachewi on one side and then Ms. Ross on the other.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, is there, I guess, a whole hidden world of Native people who are involved in these particular disciplines here? And I always feel good when I hear of one achieving something or being given some sort of recognition for their work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so scarce, actually. I understand there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of Native people who are involved, but we just don't hear about it, right?
You don't hear about it as often. For any given category, Native people are going to be the minority of the minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been privileged because I graduated from OU with a Bachelor's of Science degree. And so while I was down there, I was very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of other Native students that were also in STEAM. It seems that most of the people I knew that were Native students went into engineering, particularly petroleum engineering. And my interest is more in the medical arts, and particularly too mathematics. I really love the history of mathematics and indigenous and Native contributions to mathematics and to science, and how we processed and thought about those things.
Now, this question may be a bit more off the wall, but is this kind of a hard sell for Native students who may be looking at perhaps some more vocational kinds of careers or things that don't quite rise to the more elevated end of science? I guess maybe sometimes people selling themselves short, perhaps.
I think a lot of people sell themselves short, and I can say just a little bit of my background. Whenever I started college, I had to start with remedial math, but I get really mad when I don't understand things, and I have kind of a contrarian nature. So for me, I really wanted to understand it better, something that confused me my whole life. So I just started from the bottom with remedial math and worked my way up to where I took 3 higher level science classes. It was calculus, statistics, and I had college algebra, and I'm forgetting the other one right now. And so that's just how I did it. I had to be methodical, and I think if people are methodical in their approach to it and are surrounded by the right people, that they can achieve a lot more than they initially think that they can. We need VOTEC programs, and we also need our own people supporting our tribes in these fields too. It's a huge issue to me and important to me that our own people are representing ourselves with our tribes, whatever tribe they may come from, because it's only us that's going to understand our Native communities in that unique way that an outsider is not going to be able to understand the nuances.
Well, let me explore that just a little bit now. I think Native people have a relationship with the earth and Mother Nature that's somewhat different from the more dominant society. Does that affect any of the studies or perhaps the results of Native people being involved in their projects? Is there some kind of difference there, do you think?
I think that there is a difference, especially when some of those Native students are coming from a more cultural background and a more traditional background. And even I noticed some of the students at OU that didn't necessarily come from a family like that. Whenever they got to OU and they were surrounded by other students that were, they just started getting involved and going to all the functions, and they kind of rolled back into that system. And so a lot of Native people that are in STEM that I've noticed, they tend to be in the environmental sciences. My mom is a great example of that, Yvette Wiley. She worked for Creek Nation for a long time in our environmental sciences department, and I think that's a really important field for Native people to be in, because the relationship that we have to nature, to earth, it's in Western science, it's more of a top-down, it's hierarchical, like humans are at the top, everything else is below. For a lot of Native people, I think that we understand that's not necessarily how things are, and that's a very arrogant and Western way of thinking about things, and that it's a more reciprocal nature. Everything has its place, and nothing is necessarily more important or less important than the other thing. And I think that's a stance in it. way of thinking and epistemology that's greatly missing from Western science, and they could benefit from a more native or indigenous way of thinking when it comes to regard for other life, for inanimate things.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the challenges to becoming involved in a career in science or technology and things like that would be the book learning, shall we say, that you have to go through to perhaps achieve a goal like that. I mean, you mentioned some math there and things that I was horrible at, and other things where you might have to enjoy reading, perhaps.
Yeah.
And dealing with things of that nature, studying, and you're taking time with a book when you'd rather be going to a powwow or something like that.
Yeah.
But is that a challenge that you run across when you're dealing with people who are considering these careers? We call it selling themselves short earlier, but making a decision that, well, I'll take the easy path kind of thing instead of sitting down and doing all this studying, which is not a whole lot of fun.
What I can say, what I notice is that for a lot of us Native students that were science majors at OU, that we would take our books with us to powwows and to the dinners, or we would intentionally be like, okay, you know, it's Wednesday night dinner at the Jacobson house. I will go there for an hour and a half, say hi, eat, and then leave because I have a calculus exam tomorrow.
Oh, God.
And so we still were able to socialize well enough, but, you know, had a good study plan at home as well. And, you know, a lot of people did study kind of on the go, too, while they were involved in going to the various Native functions.
Well, you know, in all my years, I guess I've never seen somebody reading a book while doing a two-step, so...
Well, from the side, when they're sitting down.
Yeah, okay. All right. But it's not something that's really foreign to Native people. A closer examination, perhaps, of Mother Earth and trying to understand that. Now, of the 4 capital letters we're talking about, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is any one of those drawing more recruits, so to speak? Do you have a feel?
Yeah, especially here in Oklahoma because the oil industry is so huge here. Engineering seems to disproportionately be where a lot of science majors go, and that also is including the Native students I was friends with down at OU. And then after that, I would say it would be the medical field. I see a lot going in and going on to grad school so that they can become an MD or a DO. And after that, it would be scientists like environmental sciences. And now I'm starting to see more and more, which is exciting because I am a big fan of DNA and genomics myself. I'm seeing more Native students and youth getting into genomics and going into that field. And I think that's really important too, because there has not been the best relationship between academics, white academics, and their ethics regarding Native people and their research of them in our DNA and our heritage. And so for us to have our own people doing that and representing ourselves and understanding what's appropriate and what's not, that's for all of STEM, but that's why we need more of us in it. Now,
this question isn't perhaps directly looking at STEM, but are there support groups now, Native students, associations that get together? I think there is one Native science group and educators and things like that. Are there a lot of those kinds of things around? Did you run across that sort of support?
Yeah, so at OU there's ACES, which is the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. And I was involved with them for as much as my schedule allowed, but because I was a McNair scholar at OU, and so I was involved with a lot of undergrad research, I was a unusually busy undergrad student and didn't have a lot of free time. But I knew some of the people that were involved with that and some of the leaders, and they did a really good job with that organization. and there was a lot of support. They had a lot of study groups, so it was really cool to have there be Native only science major study groups together and helping each other out in that way. And other things too, because a lot of us are first gen college students,
Right.
and we don't have a lot of family support like how a lot of the other students at OU had. So a lot of times, just peripherally, we helped each other out with food and rides and a little bit of gas money from time to time.
Yeah, important stuff, or else you got a
Yeah.
kind of a rough going there.
Yeah.
As the Native American world is, let's call it, becoming more educated in the dominant society and be able to deal with that, we see achievements here and there by Native students who are able to grasp perhaps the principles involved and just really go with it, and have a good time. And we're seeing, I think, a growth in that as more of our people recognize the need for education and higher education and involvement in perhaps these areas, which are generally tend to be well-paying positions, by the way. And we're seeing little guys, in becoming involved in something like the let's use the phrase robotics. They have a little thing here a couple times a year where kids program these little robots to move around and pick up things and that sort of thing. How do you see that? I personally think it's incredibly encouraging to have an 11-year-old explain to me how he programmed this robot to do that, and it's over my head for the most part. But I'm thinking, my God, I'm so proud of you, little one, that you can do this, and this sort of thing. But we're seeing that I think growing across our Native American world. So how does that strike you? What are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
I'm always happy to see things like that too. And the younger that a child is that is exposed to things like robotics or medicine or biology and chemistry, I think that it increases the likelihood that they will latch on to that and feel that they are also capable of doing that themselves. I know when I was a young person, I did not have very many brown people, Native people, role models concerning the sciences. And so I didn't really feel like I had a place in that, even though I really liked it and wanted to learn more about it. So that's also important too with like this Native STEM camp that we're doing, is that these young ones that are getting exposed to things like robotics or whatever their interest is, that they're seeing people that look like them doing this stuff, and also coming from their own communities too. And concerning robotics, I don't know what place that has yet for tribes, but I know that there is a place for it, and we just don't know what it is yet.
Okay, well, I have to confess, I've never seen any Indian kids involved in battle bots yet, so that robot fighting thing, which is actually, if you look at it, kind of interesting from the concepts involved in building these fighting robots and the strategies and things like that. But now you mentioned your conference coming up. Let's take a minute or two to talk about that. Now, what have you got planned there?
So we're doing a STEM camp for Native kids, and that's going to be over spring break, which is the days we're doing it. It will be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it will be on March 20th, 21st, and 22nd from about noon to 5:30 p.m. We provide lunch and snacks, and over those 3 days, we're going to have a lot of different instructors coming in, and they're all Native, except for my one Hutke friend. And
yeah, they're out there.
yeah, he's cool. He's down. And so we're going to be having like Turner and Ray Lynn from the Mvskoke Cultural Department. They're going to be coming out, and their backgrounds are in anthropology, and they're going to be talking about seed dispersal and plant anatomy, but also some of the cultural, like Mvskoke cultural components of how we use plants and seeds in pre-contact in Southeast. And so if it's going to be open, I think 6 to 12 years of age, and if parents are interested in enrolling their kids, it is free to them. It does not cost any money. The only requirement is that they're 6 to 12 and that they are enrolled with the tribe somewhere. And they can go to thickdescriptions.org, and there is an application on there for them to fill out, and then we'll look at that and get back to them.
Okay, now, do you have smaller little seminars or camps around Creek Country?
You know, this is the first time we've done something like this, but Thick Descriptions, the organization, they've been doing these STEAM camps for kids, for minority kids, underrepresented kids, for the past couple of years, but it's mainly been in the Oklahoma City area or the Norman area or more rural Oklahoma. How I first came into contact with Suzette Chang, who's the director, is she was doing one in Boley, Oklahoma, which historically is an African-American town. And honestly, if you looked back at those families long enough, I think you'd see a lot of them probably have Creek and Choctaw ancestry too. And so I went down there and I did a segment. I did a lesson on brown people math.
So it's growing. It's picking up here and there in the smaller areas. But the one you just mentioned is the main stem. Wow, that's great.
And I've never heard of anything like this before either.
Neither have I.
Where it's just like overwhelmingly Native scientists and engineers, mathematician instructors for Native kids, and all of the experiments we'll be doing with them and activities with these kids, there's overwhelmingly going to be a cultural component to it as well.
So how does it make you feel then when you discover someone in a particular field that you didn't know about, or the numbers perhaps that you run across? Is that an encouraging sign that our people are grasping perhaps and taking advantage of these opportunities?
Yeah, I think so. And I can say, when I was in my undergrad, when I was doing research, one of the programs I was researching with was the Native American Student Achievement Study, and that was on an NIH grant. And so all of everything that we found out sent back to them, and they're utilizing those numbers. But we have seen steadily over the decades that Native people are increasing in their numbers in STEAM. And what's unique about Native people that are getting involved in STEAM and going home with these degrees is that they're taking those degrees and they're going back to their tribes and their communities. For the majority of them, they want to help out their families and wherever it is they call home. And so they're taking it. So they're going away, they're getting these tools to use, and then they're coming back to their communities and making it better. And that's going to be an influence to the younger generations when they see that. It's not as common for Native people to go college, get these degrees, and then they just go off somewhere because they want to follow where the money is. That's still happening a little bit, especially with some of the petroleum engineers I've encountered. But for the most part, it's only benefiting the community by these certain people going away for a few years and then coming back.
I hear that a lot about a number of different professions or disciplines. People who become teachers want to take it back to their communities, or leadership qualities they want to take back and improve a lot of their own tribes and things like this. Now, for the Mvskoke Creek Nation, are there any numbers there that you're familiar with, or do you want to take a wild guess or anything like that?
Well, me being a stickler and coming from a science background, I don't want to take a wild guess. Unless I have more accurate numbers, it's kind of like antithetical to me.
Yeah, right.
I want to have something exact for you, Gary. I don't want to just guess.
Okay.
But I know that there's a few of us, and it's increasing. And the people I know, like for instance Raylan and Turner, that's a really great example of people of our own community, our own tribe that have gone away. They went to college. I know Raylan went to South America, and she was doing something on the Amazon for a while, ethnobotany, but she's back, and they're doing stuff for our tribe and helping out. Both of them are very smart in their unique ways that are complementary to each other.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It makes you feel so good to hear about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I had attended, was assigned to cover one STEM-related event at the airport in Jinx. Yeah, big, huge things, kind of a banquet and fancy dress kind of thing. But I looked around, and the only other Native people I saw was our own tribe had someone involved with them, and they came to support. I'm thinking, my God, where are all the Indians here? And I'm thinking, we can do this. This is not beyond our grasp. Now, for someone who is considering a career in one of these disciplines, what sort of preparation should they make educational?
Well, if they can start by coming to the camp.
That's all right. It's shameless promotion. I'll go for that.
Yeah. But also, just going to the library and talking to their parents about it. Something that my parents did a very good job of is we went to the library almost every week. And so when I was at the library, I was able to just check out as many books as I wanted to about whatever topics I wanted to. And so that kind of helped, filter the things that I found interesting or maybe not so interesting, and then focus on that. And also trying to reach out to their teachers, and telling them what they're interested in. And oftentimes teachers, at any grade level, are really receptive to that, and they will try to encourage those kids, hey, read this, or like, I found this, check this out.
Okay, well, I tell you what, we're going to have to wrap this up, but once more, let's get these specifics on your upcoming camp.
So it will be March 20th, 21st, and 22nd in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it is open to Native kids age 6 through 12, and if you want to register for this, please go to thickdescriptions.org and fill out the application, and we will get back to you. Lunch and snacks provided.
Yay, there's a good convincer there. All right, well, Apollonia Pena, thank you so much. I hope I got it right that
You got
Sunday.
it.
We appreciate you coming in, and that was an interesting chat we had. Perhaps we'll want to do this again on the flip side of your camp.
Yeah, okay. Mado.
Nga. All right, now, in the couple of minutes we have left, some community announcements real fast. Wild Onion Dinners, March 2nd, which is gone. The 7th, D.D. Etchison, UMC in Tahlequah, Angie Smith Memorial in Oklahoma City, New Hope Indian UMC in Dewey. On the 16th, La Placo United Methodist Church is coming up. And let's see, that's an all-you-can-eat dinner, by the way. And a little casetta on the 23rd, 11 to 3 there. What else we have here? Lighthorse versus the Council. Basketball game on March the 8th at the Mvskoke Dome. That might be interesting.